إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ به تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا ما يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله الله بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة ما يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعص الله ورسوله فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا ما بعد معاشر المسلمين أوصيكم ونفسي أولا بتقوى الله عز وجل فإن الله تعالى يقول بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة. Now in this khutbah, I want to address a problem that is affecting us all around the globe. A few weeks ago, a mother approached me in the Brampton area with tears in her eyes after I delivered a khutbah. She wanted me to talk to her son because her son, having been brought up as a good Muslim for many years, has now turned towards atheism. And I thought that that was a problem that is unique to the West because I have faced this problem many times. Many parents have approached me with a similar problem. And I just got back from Malaysia. I was surprised that in Malaysia this is a problem too, because I associated with one of the centers there that present the message of Islam to non-Muslims. And they said that, in fact, atheism is affecting the Muslims there as well. They also reported a similar story to me where a mother called into their center and said, please talk to my son because now my son has become an atheist. So we as Muslims need to be equipped to deal with this as a problem. We need to know the arguments for the existence of God. We need to understand how to explain this to our children. So that they do not turn to that direction. Like when we talk at home and the children ask, well, Daddy, how do we know that there is a God? Well, then you have to give them an intelligent and intellectual answer. It can no longer be, okay, that's what we believe and that's the end of it. You have to give some good reasons. So I want to give some good reasons in this khutbah and try to remember them. The first good reason is that there has to be an explanation for why this world exists. Now, let's say we're looking at something and there is no explanation for it. Well, then that's it. We say there's no explanation. But if there is an explanation to be given, then there has to be a good and reasonable explanation. When might we not need an explanation? You don't need an explanation when something is so obvious and it is a given. Let's say, for example, your friend is in prison. Now, at first, when you hear about this, you're shocked. You go to the friend. What happened? How come they put you here? Okay, so that means you're asking because you want to know. You want an explanation for why the friend is there. Now he gives you the explanation. He might tell you, for example, okay, they put some false charges against me, they framed me, and here I am in prison. All right, so now this is a given fact. Whatever the circumstances that got your friend there, he is in prison, right? You cannot do anything about that. He cannot do anything about that. He's in prison. He's just going to wait his time till he leaves. Let's say now, while your friend is in prison, you throw a party for your friends. And you send out the invitations. Your friends come. Of course, not the one who is in prison, because he's not going to get time off to come to your party. Later on, he calls you by phone, and you're having a conversation with him. So now your conversation with him, why did you miss my party? Well, I'm in prison. Why are you in prison? Is that reasonable for you to ask now why you're in prison? No, that's over and done with. You already know for a fact that he's in prison. He cannot get out, poor guy. That's the situation, right? You're not going to ask him, why are you in prison? Because you didn't come to my party. All right? You're not even going to ask him why didn't you come to my party, because you know he's in prison. He cannot get out. All right, so now our universe exists. Scientists are searching for a reason. Why does the universe exist? They don't throw up their hands and say, that's it, the universe exists, just like the guy in prison. Guy in prison doesn't have to explain again why he's in prison. He's in prison, that's a fact. Now, the universe exists. Scientists don't say, oh, the universe exists and that's a fact and we don't have to have a reason for its existence. Rather, scientists are trying to explain, where did this universe come from? How did it originate? So they say that it originated in a Big Bang explosion that occurred some 13.8 billion years ago from a singularity. Then they themselves are trying to ask, okay, what came before that, what they call a singularity? Singularity is a mathematical point. It's their way of saying nothing. But now they want to explain, what is this nothing? So they might explain, for example, it is a quantum vacuum. It is a sea of particles, some positive, some negative, that may cancel each other out. But if it so happens that they do not cancel each other out, then you can have the birth of matter expanding into our universe. It is a story. It is almost like a belief now. But they have to have some explanation, and they are reaching for whatever explanation can be given in scientific and physical terms. That means they want to have an explanation. So they're saying that the universe as it is not self-explanatory, just like your friend in prison. There has to be a reason. How did it come into existence? Some explanation, some cause, some factor. So now, starting with this, knowing that scientists are looking for what is called the theory of everything, or a grand unified theory called GUT for short, G for grand, U for unified, T for theory, GUT for short. Knowing that scientists are looking for this, we can offer them a good explanation. A good explanation for why the universe exists is that there is a God who created the universe. That's a simple answer to our puzzle as to why God exists, as to why the universe exists. This does not mean that we rule out science and we say we're going to stop looking for any scientific explanation, but alongside a scientific explanation, we have a good explanation for the existence of the universe, that is, that God created the universe. We can take it further than this. We can say that here our universe is like a physical moment. Now this moment itself owes its existence to a moment before it. Just like every child is born from a parent, and the parents are born from some other parents, and some other parents are born from the grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents, and so on, all the way back. But there has to be a beginning. Because if there's no beginning, then if we're going from here all the way back, we keep going, well then you'll never get to the beginning if there's no beginning, right? You keep going ad infinitum, there is an infinite regress, you cannot get to the end. But then if you cannot get to the end starting from here, neither could you get to here starting from the end, because there's no end. So there has to be a beginning in order for us to have this. Our moment in the physical universe is almost like a baby. This moment owes itself to the moment before it. That moment, add to it some physical laws, which we call natural laws, produced our present moment. So our present moment owes itself to a physical existence that was before it. And that moment owes itself to a moment that was before it. And similarly, you can keep thinking all the way back. You can go into an infinite regress, which means you never get to the beginning. And of course, if you can never get to the beginning, then you cannot get from the beginning to here. So there has to be a beginning where it all stops. And where it all stops, it cannot be a physical moment, because that physical moment itself will need another physical moment before it. The only thing that will stop the whole series is if there is a non-physical being, such as God, who brings the whole series into existence. Let me use a different example. You see a series of dominoes. Dominoes are made to stand tall, and then one is knocked, and it knocks the other one, knocks the other one, knocks the other one. Now you're somewhere in between looking at dominoes falling all over the place. One is knocking the other one, knocking the other one, knocking the other one. They're all falling, right? Now, you don't see the first one fall. You're only standing in the middle and seeing those that are falling before you. But you know that it must be that one before that, one before one, that one before that was falling. But then, that means there must be a first domino, true? Because if the first one didn't fall, none would fall. Okay, but now if we asked, what knocked the first one, it cannot be another domino. Otherwise, we wouldn't call that one the first one. What knocked the first domino it cannot be a domino. And so too with this physical universe. What caused the first physical moment could not be also a physical moment. It cannot be anything that we imagine as part of this universe. It has to be outside of this universe that caused this universe to come into being. And since time is a feature of this universe that we explain now to have at least 4 dimensions, 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, it means that whoever caused the universe to come into being must be a timeless being. And that is what we're referring to as God. So if somebody is going to ask us now, okay, so if you're saying that everything that's created must have a creator, who is the creator of God? Well then, that's like asking us, what is the domino that knocked down the first domino? And the answer has to be that it's not a domino. In a similar way, when we're saying that God created the universe, He is the cause of the entire universe to come into being, and He is a timeless being. If He is a timeless being, then He doesn't come into existence at a certain time. Like you were born at a certain date, right? You can give your date of birth in your passport. That's the date you were born. You are born in time. But if time does not apply to you, you're neither born nor do you go out of existence. You neither come into existence nor go out of existence. You're timeless. That is what God is. So the question of like who created God does not apply to God because He is a timeless being. He is eternal. The things come into existence in this world, in this time, but God is outside of this time. Now let's put it in a different way. This universe, everyone will agree, is what you call, philosophers use these terms, what you will call a contingent being. A contingent being. And what that means, let's explain the word contingent. You know, if somebody says he has a contingency plan, that means if things don't go right, he has an alternative plan, right? So when we speak about contingency, we're speaking about alternative. Somebody may have a contingency fund. And that means if things go wrong, we have some funds to fall back on. Some of these condo developers, they have to have a contingency fund. So that if things don't go right, their expenses are more than they anticipated, they can use the contingency fund. So that's some backup. All right. So that means that when we're thinking of contingency, we're thinking that things can go one way or it can go the other way. Now in science, if things can go one way or the other way, you have to have an explanation of why it went one way. Let's say a ball is rolling down a mountain. All right. And the ball steers towards the right. Now there has to be a reason why it steered towards the right. Maybe it's weighted in a certain way that when you roll it, it will steer towards the right. Or maybe the mountain path itself is leaning towards the right, so that when the ball rolls down, it will roll towards the right. There has to be a physical explanation. You cannot just say, oh, it just rolled to the right and that's the end of it. Now this universe is like that. It is a contingent being. It doesn't have to exist. The fact that it exists needs an explanation. And the best explanation for that is that God created it. Now, somebody may say, well, why doesn't God need an explanation? The answer to that is that when we speak of God, we're speaking about a necessary being. And that is not a contingent being. In the minds of believers, God is not like maybe He exists and maybe He doesn't exist. He has to exist. He is a necessary being. So now, let's think about the distinction between the contingent and the necessary being. Contingent, he may or may not exist. Necessary has to exist. Now let's start with the fact that this universe, by all counts, everybody will agree, is a contingent being. Even the atheist will say that this universe is contingent. It doesn't have to exist, it just happens to exist, and we're searching for an explanation of why it exists. Why are they searching for an explanation? Because this is a contingent thing. Alright? So let's say this contingent thing owes its explanation and its reason for being in another contingent thing. So there was another contingent thing that existed before this one and gave birth to this one. Alright? So now that contingent thing requires an explanation too. And if that explanation is another contingent thing, well then we have to search for the explanation for that other contingent thing. What brought that one into existence? The only way this thinking stops is when we arrive at what we will call a necessary being. A being that does not require an explanation. It just exists because he exists. Just like your friend who is in the prison. He happens to be in prison. There's no further explanation for why he is there. He just happens to be in prison. He doesn't have to explain why he's not at your party. He is in prison. And he doesn't have to explain why he's in prison because he told you that already. They trumped up false charges against him and framed him. Now he is in prison. That's a fact. He's going to be in prison for so many years, whether 10 or whatever. So for that time, you can't ask, why is he in prison? It's not reasonable for you to ask that. So now, when we know that there must be a necessary being that brought every contingent being into existence, then that necessary being is such, you cannot ask, well, who created that necessary being? That's like asking, who created the one who does not have a creator? So the statement, the question itself, does not make any sense. So that's, in short, many different ways of putting together what we refer to as the cosmological argument for the existence of God. Whichever one you use, whichever one you seems at home with you, that will carry the burden of proving that God exists as a necessary and an eternal being. Now, add to that, we see that there is evidence of design wherever we look. When Einstein described the relationship between mass and energy with the equation E equals mc squared, saying that energy equals to mass times the square of the speed of light, he was describing the universe as it is. There is a physical constant known as the speed of light. Light travels at the amazing speed of 300,000 kilometers per second. And energy can be converted into mass, and mass into energy. And a lot of energy is contained in a small amount of mass. It is an equation like this that helps to understand the hydrogen bomb in the first place, and now the atomic bomb and nuclear bombs. Because in a small amount of mass, you can have an enormous amount of energy waiting to be released. Because energy equals to mass times the square of the speed of light. So that means if you divide energy by the square of the speed of light, then you will know how much mass you're dealing with that is equivalent to that other side of the equation. So now, what Einstein was describing is the nature of things in the universe. He was not prescribing that energy has to be like this. He's just describing it the way he finds it. So the question is, why do things in the universe conform to mathematical equations? Such as the equation E equals mc squared. It could have been anything, right? And it could be like one thing one day and another thing tomorrow. Why is it constant like this? That is only because some intelligent mind designed it to be like that, and Einstein is now discovering how it is. He's describing what he sees, and what he sees conforms to a mathematical equation. For it to conform to a mathematical equation, this shows that it is designed. And that design is evidence that there is a designer. Everything that people describe as natural laws, what are they describing? They're describing what we refer to from the Quran as Sunnatullah. This is the Sunnah of Allah. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. And you will not find any change in the sunnah of Allah. This is what people are describing as natural laws, because they don't want to refer to God anymore. So they speak of natural laws. It's no longer God's laws. So then they will speak as if nature is doing something, as if nature is going crazy, as if nature is wild, as if nature is furious, and as if nature is good to us. But who is this nature? Did anybody ever meet this person called nature? That's a substitute way of speaking of God. And we can point out that God exists, and God created the things that they call natural laws. These are God's designs that they're noticing in the universe. The third thing we'll point out is that everybody agrees that some things are good and some things are bad. Even the atheist believes that some things are just simply good and some things are just simply bad. To the extent that atheists are writing books trying to prove that atheists can also be good people. And we agree. Sometimes it might so happen that a person who professes to be an atheist is better than the person who professes to be a Muslim. It happens. In terms of character, decency, charitableness, and so on. But at the end of the day, if we subscribe to the atheistic worldview, there is nothing really good or bad. Only believing makes it so. So if all human beings get together and agree that a certain thing is good, well then that's what is good for us, for the time being, until we gather together and decide something else. And even without public agreement, if two persons differ with each other, let's say there are two Muslims arguing with each other whether something is good or something is bad. Now, if you refer back to the Quran and there is a verse about the matter, it settles the issue between the two Muslims, right? Okay. Let's say a Muslim is arguing with a non-Muslim whether something is good and something is bad. Now, you don't have a common reference point from the scripture because you show them from the Quran. Maybe they'll show you some other books. You don't have a common reference point. What do you have? You have common intelligence, right? You can use your intelligence and say, okay, our intelligence will rule on this matter. You talk about the effects of the matter at hand and so on. But now, the two persons will differ. And each has his own intelligence, each one saying, my intelligence tells me either this is good, or on the other hand, the other person saying, my intelligence tells me this thing is bad. Now in the end, you have no way of showing him that what he says is wrong, and he has no way of showing you that what you say is wrong. You have to, in the end, agree to disagree. Okay, we agree to disagree. Now the atheistic worldview is like this. Every brain, according to the atheistic worldview, has been shaped by a blind process of evolution. My brain, your brain, the atheist's brain, every brain. So if you're thinking one way and I'm thinking the other way, well, I can't say that you're wrong and you can't say that I'm wrong. Because the same process that gave you your brain to think your way gave me my brain to think my way. So whether somebody believes there is a God or no God, whether somebody believes that something is right or somebody believes that something is wrong, all of these things are equal in the atheistic worldview. So even though atheists write books to try to prove that atheists can be good people too, they are subscribing to the idea that in fact, ultimately, what you think is good is only good for you while you're thinking it. In fact, it might even be bad for you, but you're thinking it's good. But what would be bad ultimately? What is bad for survival? What is bad for practical purposes? So, for example, if we ask, why should I not murder? Of course, nobody wants to murder, but we're asking hypothetically. What's wrong with murder? Well, the answer might be, if you murder, well, then you are promoting a society in which murder is okay. In which case, somebody may come back to murder you. But then somebody can say, well, if I take all precautions, and if I gather enough power and strength and protection around me, then I can murder. Then what's wrong with that? Now, the answer is mute. There is no way of saying within the atheistic worldview that murder is wrong. And yet, everybody will agree that murder is wrong. Or at least, people will agree that it is wrong to murder a child, to rape and torture a child just for fun. Everybody will agree that this is wrong. But the only way you can agree that something is wrong is if we trust the intelligence that God has given us. And when we're talking to a person, even though we don't have any scripture to back it up, we can say that the collective human intelligence, this itself is a good guide to what is true and what is false. It's only if we can trust that intelligence. And that intelligence can only be trusted if it came not from a blind process of evolution, but through God, who may be using the process of evolution, in which case it is not blind, it is directed by God. And in that case, our brains are given to us, perhaps through the same process of evolution, but by an intelligent God who shaped the entire process to culminate in our greater human consciousness, which can be trusted. The human brain is like a computer. Who are you going to buy your computer from? From somebody who has no intelligence, and he says, look, I'm making a computer for you? Or you're going to maybe pay a few dollars more and get your computer from somebody who has the intelligence, the qualifications to make a good computer. All right, so the human brain is like a computer. Where did we get this from? Did we get it from God? Or did we get it from a blind process? If it is from a blind process, why should we trust it? In fact, whatever the brain is telling us to do, this could be for our own destruction. Maybe we have evolved up to this point where we feel that we are in control, and then the next stage will be that we create artificial intelligence, which becomes more intelligent and more powerful than us, that actually enslaves us. Maybe our evolution and our brain is leading us to our own destruction. So if we believe that God exists, we have every reason to trust the brains that we have. And then when we think that something is wrong, we can say this is by inspiration from God. God has given us the conscience to know that something is wrong, and so I trust that. I stay away from that. Even if somebody gives me $1 million, I won't take it, because this thing is wrong, and doing that wrong thing will change me forever. So I won't do it. But if we believe that it came to us through a blind process of evolution, well then what the brain is telling us is no longer dependable. We can disregard that. So if it's telling us that something is wrong, we can disregard it. And most people realize that you can't simply disregard what the brain says. You have to trust it. And if we have to trust it, we should believe that God exists. So when the atheist says, my brain tells me that God does not exist, the problem for him is that if God does not exist, there is no reason why he should trust what his brain is telling him. And so we have here 3 very good reasons for believing that God exists. I leave you with these thoughts. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ به تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وصلى الله تعالى على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين والملائكة المقربين والخلفاء الراشدين أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات ربنا لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا ميتا إلا رحمته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين